The day I saw my ex-husband's secret children listed right next to my own in his obituary, I thought the funeral home had made a typo. There, in black and white on that little folded program, under Survived By, were my two children, and two names I had never seen before in my life. David Thompson is survived by his children, Michael, Sarah, Daniel, and Jasmine. Michael and Sarah are mine. Daniel and Jasmine were not. At least, that's what I had believed for 38 years. Before I tell you how I met the other woman at my ex-husband's funeral, how our children stared at each other like ghosts in a mirror, and how my son blamed me for ignoring the signs of his father's double life, do me a small favor. If you like listening to long, honest family stories while you cook, fold laundry, drive, or try to fall asleep, tap the like button and subscribe so YouTube knows to bring you back to Aunt Ruby's voice every week. Now, pull up a chair, because this is the story of the secret second family in the obituary and how I had to decide whether to merge two broken families or finally shut the door on a man who never knew how to live in just one house. My name is Nancy. I'm 69 years old, and technically I've been divorced for 19 of those. On paper, David Thompson and I were married for 27 years. In reality, I think I lost him in pieces long before that. We met in the 1970s, back when a good mustache and a halfway decent job were enough to make a girl's mother say, "He's a keeper." He was funny, charming, the kind of man who could talk his way out of a parking ticket and into a promotion in the same week. He sold insurance. Or dreams. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. I was a nurse, steady, good with charts and people, bad with men who made me laugh more than I made myself worry. We had two kids together, Michael, my oldest, and Sarah, 3 years younger. We had a little split level outside Cleveland, a Chevy in the driveway, and a marriage that looked fine from the sidewalk. From the inside, there were cracks. Nothing anyone would have pointed at and said, "Oh, he's leading a double life." More like late nights, client dinners, trips that came up suddenly, rescheduled anniversaries, missed school concerts, and always, always a reason that sounded just plausible enough to swallow. "You know how it is in sales, Nan," he'd say, loosening his tie. "You either show up or someone else gets the commission." I'd roll my eyes, take his jacket, and tell myself at least he wasn't at a bar. Or so I thought. I want to be honest here. I did see small things. Receipts that didn't match where he said he was. A perfume smell that wasn't mine. A hotel key tucked in a suit pocket when he told me he'd slept in his car. I confronted him a few times. He always had answers. The guys crashed in one room. That's from the flight attendant spraying samples. You know how clients are. They want to stay out and you have to entertain them. I believed some. I chose to half-believe others. I had 2 kids, a mortgage, and a fear of starting over that was louder than my suspicion. So when people ask, "Did you know?" my answer is complicated. I didn't know about a second family, but I knew my husband was not a man who always came home when he said he would. We divorced when I was 50, not because of another woman, officially. On paper, it was irreconcilable differences. In my heart, it was a collection of tiny betrayals and one big one. The big one was him lying about money. Credit cards I didn't know about, debt I hadn't signed for, a home equity line of credit that suddenly appeared on a statement like a bruise I hadn't felt forming. When I found that, something in me finally snapped. I'd put up with late nights, excuses, even suspected cheating. But putting our house at risk without telling me felt like shaking the foundation of the only place I could still breathe. I gave him a choice. We go to counseling and he shows me everything, or I go to a lawyer. He went to a lawyer first. We untangled 27 years with pens and signatures. He moved out, I kept the house. We split the retirement accounts. Our kids were adults by then, but that didn't mean they weren't broken open by it. Michael sided with me. He'd seen his father's temper. He'd seen the unopened bills. Sarah tried to stay neutral. "He's still my dad," she'd say, eyes shining. "I know," I'd reply. "He's just not my husband anymore." So when people later asked, "Were you still in love with him when he died?" I could honestly say no. What I still was, though, even after 19 years apart, was attached. You don't erase 3 decades and 2 children with a judge's stamp. I thought I knew the shape of his failures. Turns out, I only knew half. He died of a heart attack in a hotel room. Of course he did. It was almost cliché. He was 69. Still traveling for work, though what work exactly none of us could fully explain anymore. The hotel called his emergency contact, our son Michael, because they'd found his number in his wallet. Michael called me on a Wednesday afternoon. "Mom," he said, his voice already frayed. "Dad's gone." I sat down hard on the little kitchen chair I've had since the kids were toddlers. "What happened?" "He was on a business trip," Michael said. "The hotel called. They think it was his heart."
I'm flying out tomorrow to handle the arrangements. I expected shock, tears, some grand swell of grief. Instead, I felt something more complicated, a mix of sadness, old anger, and a strange, hollow relief that the waiting, for what exactly I don't know, was over. I'll help with the funeral, I said. Mom, he hesitated. I think his family will probably handle most of it. I frowned. His family? You know what I mean, Michael said quickly. His side, his brothers, his ex. The words still stung, even after 19 years. Michael, I said firmly, I was married to that man longer than you've been alive. He may have left, but I buried my marriage a long time ago. I can bury the man. He sighed. Okay, he said. I'll call you when I know more. I did not know then that when he said his family, he wasn't just talking about brothers. He was talking about people who shared his last name and his eyes that I had never met. The obituary came out 3 days later. My friend Linda brought the newspaper to my door. I thought you might want to see this, she said gently. I smoothed out the page with hands that suddenly felt older. There was his picture, taken maybe 10 years ago. Full head of graying hair, that same charming half-smile I'd fallen for at 21 and grown suspicious of by 45. David Thompson, age 69, of Columbus, formerly of Cleveland, passed away unexpectedly. I skimmed the usual parts. Beloved father, hard worker, loved by many. Then my eyes hit the line that knocked the air out of me. Survived by his children, Michael Sarah Thompson, Daniel Lewis, and Jasmine Lewis. I read it again. Michael, Sarah, and then 2 names with a different last name tacked on like afterthoughts. Lewis. Daniel and Jasmine. Children. Plural. How old are they? I asked Michael on the phone that night, trying to keep my voice level. He was quiet for a second too long. Mom, he said finally. We can talk about this later. No, I said. We'll talk about it now. Who are they? He exhaled, frustrated. They're his kids, he said. With who? Another pause. Her name is Karen, he said. She was his wife. His what? I stood up so fast my chair scraped. He remarried? Apparently, Michael said bitterly. Low-key, quietly, whatever you want to call it. We found marriage paperwork when we checked his things. They've been together for over 20 years. 20 years. We'd been divorced May teen. I did the math without even wanting to. So that means, yeah, Michael said.
It overlaps. There it was. Confirmation that the cracks I'd seen in our marriage had not just been business trips and bad moods. They'd been hallways to another home. How old are the kids? I asked, my mouth dry. Daniel's 32, he said. Jasmine's 28. I closed my eyes. While I'd been packing lunches for his own son and daughter, my husband had been making babies with someone else. They were only a few years younger than my kids. I sank back into my chair. Mom, Michael said, you still there? Yes, I said. I'm just trying to decide whether to throw up or scream. He didn't laugh. Funeral's on Saturday, he said. You going? If his new wife put my kids' names in that obituary, I said slowly, then yes, I'm going. If my children are going to stand in a room with their father's other family, their mother will be standing too. The church was packed. It always is when a charming man dies suddenly. People come out of the woodwork to say he lit up a room, even if he spent years going dark on the people who lived in his house. I wore a simple black dress, the same one I'd worn to 2 other funerals and our divorce hearing. It seemed fitting. Michael and Sarah met me in the parking lot. Michael looked hard, jaw clenched, tie crooked. Sarah looked like she'd been crying for 3 days straight. Hi, Mom, she whispered, hugging me tightly. You okay? I will be, I said. Inside, the funeral home smell hit me. Flowers, carpet cleaner, and something under it all that smelled like old grief. We walked into the viewing room. There he was, laid out in a suit I'd never seen before. He looked smaller. Death does that. It shrinks people down to something that can fit in a box. I stood by the casket and felt a strange calm. I forgive you for some things, I thought. I will never forgive you for others. And either way, you are beyond caring now. Then I saw her, standing on the other side of the casket, straight-backed, tissues in hand, a woman about my age, short brown hair, a tired kind of pretty, wearing a navy dress and a wedding band. Beside her stood a man and a woman in their early 30s. He had David's jawline, she had his eyes. Daniel and Jasmine, the second family. We stared at each other over his body, like people meeting in a mirror from slightly different angles.
Finally, the woman stepped forward. "You must be Nancy," she said softly. I nodded. "And you must be—" "Karen," she said. I was his wife." The word hung breathless between us. Up close, she looked more fragile. Not some glamorous mistress from a movie, but a woman who knew how to scoop cat litter and pay bills. Like me. I didn't know whether I wanted to hug her or slap her. Maybe both. "I'm so sorry," she said suddenly, eyes filling. "I swear to you, I thought he'd been divorced for years before we married. He told me you didn't want anything to do with him. He said you'd moved on." "We were divorced," I said. "We just weren't erased." She nodded quickly. "I didn't know about the overlap," she whispered. "Not until later. By then we had the kids, the mortgage. I told him to tell your children. He said he would. He said there was no good time." I believed her. Not because I'm naive, but because I recognize the sentence. There's never a good time to tell the truth when the lie has gotten comfortable. "Mom?" Michael's voice behind me was tight. I turned. "This is Karen," I said quietly. "And these are her children." "Our siblings," Sarah said softly. Michael flinched. "Half," he snapped. "Half siblings. Half of his honesty. Half of his life. Hidden from us." He turned a glare on me that took my breath away. "You knew," he said. "What?" "You had to," he said, eyes blazing. "All those trips. The late nights. I remember you fighting. I remember you crying in the kitchen. How do you not notice your husband has an entire other family?" The words hit me like slaps. "I noticed something was wrong," I said quietly. "I just didn't know the shape of it. And I asked." He lied. "You blame me for not being a better detective. I blame him for being a better liar." Karen stepped in. "Please," she said, voice trembling. "Not here. This isn't their fault. Any of them." She looked at my kids. "At least you had half of him," she said. "They had weekends, vacations, stories." Jasmine spoke for the first time. "We thought he was working," she said. "When he disappeared on holidays, we thought he was a busy man doing his best. We had no idea there were other stockings on some other mantle." Her voice cracked. "I found your pictures," she said to me, "in a box in the garage a few years ago. I asked who you were. He said, 'My ex. It was a long time ago.' He made it sound like you were just a chapter, not half the book." We all stood there in that thick funeral air, 4 grown children and 2 women who had loved the same man and only been told half of each other's existence. He had taken his cowardice right to the grave and left us holding the fallout. The service went on. People told stories about what a great guy he was, how he never met a stranger, how he was such a family man. Michael snorted quietly at that one. Sarah reached for his hand. Afterward, in the little reception hall with bad coffee and triangle sandwiches, the families mingled. That word, families, felt strange in my head. Michael and Daniel found themselves at the same table. They looked at each other like 2 versions of the same file. "You knew?" Daniel asked. "Not about you," Michael said. "Just that he lied more than he told the truth." "We thought you didn't want him," Daniel said. "That you just walked away." Michael's jaw clenched. "He walked away," he said. "We just stopped following." In a corner, I watched Jasmine and Sarah compare childhoods. Presents he gave both of them, jokes they'd heard word for word, vacations that suddenly lined up with holidays he'd had to work. I stood there and felt something I hadn't expected. Guilt. Not for what I'd done. I hadn't made any of these choices. But for what my children had been born into. A family that was never the whole story. Karen approached me with a paper plate in her hand, untouched. "I don't know what happens now," she said quietly. "I didn't want to blindside you. When the funeral home asked for the obituary details, I told them I wanted all the children listed. I didn't think it was fair to erase any of them, but I know seeing their names must have hurt." "Yes," I said. "It did. But leaving them out would have hurt too. They didn't ask to be born into a secret." We sat down at a small table. "Did he love you?" she asked suddenly. It startled me. "Yes," I said slowly. "Once. In the way he knew how. Clumsily, selfishly sometimes, but yes." "Me too," she said. "And he loved them. I believe that. I also believe he was a coward. I'm sorry for what he did to you, to your children." "Me too," I said. "We said finally. "If you ever want anything to do with us, I would understand if you didn't. But if your children want to know their half-siblings, my door is open. No pressure, no expectations, just open." She looked tired, older than me in some ways, younger in others. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk away, to put all of this in a box labeled David's mess and never open it again. Another part of me saw my children in hers, trying to fit their lives together like mismatched puzzle pieces. They hadn't chosen any of this. They were, all four of them, collateral damage from a man who built a life like a house of cards in two different towns. The question wasn't, did he deserve for us to be one family? He was beyond deserving anything now. The question was, do we? The service went on. People told stories about what a great guy he was, how he never met a stranger, how he was such a family man. Michael snorted quietly at that one. Sarah reached for his hand. Afterward, in the little reception hall with bad coffee and triangle sandwiches, the families mingled. That word, families, felt strange in my head. Michael and Daniel found themselves at the same table. They looked at each other like two versions of the same file. "You knew?" Daniel asked. "Not about you," Michael said. "Just that he lied more than he told the truth." "We thought you didn't want him," Daniel said. "That you just walked away." Michael's jaw clenched. He walked away. We just stopped following. In a corner, I watched Jasmine and Sarah compare childhoods. Presents he gave both of them. Jokes they'd heard word for word. Vacations that suddenly lined up with holidays he'd had to work. I stood there and felt something I hadn't expected. Guilt. Not for what I'd done. I hadn't made any of these choices. But for what my children had been born into. A family that was never the whole story. Karen approached me with a paper plate in her hand, untouched. "I don't know what happens now," she said quietly. "I didn't want to blindside you. When the funeral home asked for the obituary details, I told them I wanted all the children listed. I didn't think it was fair to erase any of them, but I know seeing their names must have hurt." "Yes," I said. "It did. But leaving them out would have hurt too. They didn't ask to be born into a secret." We sat down at a small table. "Did he love you?" she asked suddenly. It startled me. "Yes," I said slowly. "Once. In the way he knew how. Clumsily. Selfishly sometimes. But yes." "Me too," she said. "And he loved them. I believe that. I also believe he was a coward. I'm sorry. For what he did to you, to your children." "Me too," I said. We sat in silence. "I don't know," she said finally. "If you ever want anything to do with us, I would understand if you didn't. But if your children want to know their half-siblings, my door is open. No pressure, no expectations, just open." She looked tired, older than me in some ways, younger in others. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk away, to put all of this in a box labeled David's mess and never open it again. Another part of me saw my children in hers.
Said, "Are you talking to them?" "To who?" "To them," he said sharply. "The other family. The woman. The kids." "I've texted Karen," I said, "once, to say I got home safe. And Jasmine sent Sarah a picture of a photo they'd found of your father holding them and a baby you." He looked like he'd been punched. "I don't want them in our lives," he said. "Why?" "Because they're proof," he said. "Proof that my entire childhood was half a lie. I don't need a walking, talking reminder that he was splitting holidays and telling two stories." I chose my words carefully. "They're not proof," I said gently. "They're people. They're as betrayed as you are, by the same man." He shook his head. "If you want to make some kind of sisterhood of the betrayed club with that woman, go ahead," he said. "But don't ask me to sit across from the kids he raised on the days he wasn't with us and pretend we're all one big happy family." "I'm not asking you to pretend anything," I said. "I'm asking you to decide what you want for yourself, not for him. He doesn't get to control one more thing from the grave." Michael's eyes flashed. "You should have left him sooner." There it was. The knife. "I was a kid," he went on. "I saw the signs. You saw more. If you'd kicked him out when I was 10 instead of 15, maybe there wouldn't have been enough time for him to start a whole other family." I swallowed hard. "Do you really believe that?" I asked quietly. He hesitated.
I believe, he said, that you wanted to believe him. That you didn't push too hard because staying was easier than facing what leaving would look like. And now look. He gestured with his hands like he was presenting a show. Here we are. Half siblings, secret wife, funeral drama. All because nobody wanted to look straight at the truth. His words landed in places I thought I'd fortified. I was trying, I said slowly, to keep a roof over your heads, to keep food on the table, to keep you from having to move schools in the middle of everything. Yes, I believed him longer than I should have. Because I grew up in a house where divorce meant shame, where women were told to stand by their man until their feet bled. I didn't have your language for boundaries and self-respect. I had rent to pay and no family to run back to. And I did not have the full truth. He lied to both of us, to all of us. If you need to be mad at me for not being perfect, fine. But don't twist this into me being responsible for the lies he told to a whole other address. He looked down. His shoulders sagged. I don't know what to do with this, he said quietly. Neither do I admitted. I'm just a little more used to not knowing. I thought about it for weeks. About Karen, about the kids, about the tangled, ugly way our lives had overlapped without our consent. Some nights I'd lie awake and picture holidays in two houses, little Daniel and Jasmine waiting at a window for a dad who was stuck at work. My Michael and Sarah standing in our driveway with coats on waiting for that same man to pick them up for his weekend. How many times had he lied to one set of children to spend time with the other? How many times had he said, "I'm sorry, something came up," when the something was another birthday party with another cake? I kept coming back to one thing. None of that had been their choice. Not my kids, not hers. We were all passengers on a train he'd been driving between two stations. He was gone. Did I really want to throw the other passengers off the platform now for a ticket they'd never bought? I met Karen for coffee. In public. Neutral ground. We sat across from each other in a booth like two women on a blind date neither of us had requested. I've thought about it, I said. About us. Them. She nodded, fingers tight around her cup. I don't expect anything, she said. I honestly thought your kids would never want to see us again. My kids can decide for themselves, I said. As for me, I don't want a blended family. He blended enough for all of us. But I also don't want to spend whatever years I have left pretending you don't exist when you do. Here's what I can handle. I can know you. I can be civil. I can be kind. If our children want to see each other, I will not stand in the way. I will not badmouth you to them. And I hope you won't badmouth me. She blinks back tears. I don't, she said. You were the shadow I felt but never saw. I was angry at you for a long time before I realized you were just as lied to as I was. I don't want to spend my 60s fighting a woman I should have been having coffee with 20 years ago. We both laughed at that. A short, sad sound. We're not going to be friends, I said. Not the way you build from scratch. But maybe we can be something like reluctant relatives, who nod when we see each other at graduations and weddings, and remember that we survived the same storm. She smiled, tired and real. I can live with that, she said. Michael took longer. He still bristled at any mention of the others. Sarah, more open-hearted, went out for drinks with Jasmine. They posted a photo once of the two of them together. Two women with the same nose, in different childhoods. Someone in the comments wrote, "You look like sisters." They both replied, "We are." Michael saw it. He didn't comment, but he didn't block her either. Small Marcy's. One night, months later, he came over again. He sat down, this time without armor. I met Daniel, he said, at a bar. We watched a game. How was it? I asked. Weird, he said. But it was also like talking to a version of myself who took a different exit off the same highway. He's mad too. At Dad, at you some, at his mom some, at the universe. But he's funny. He makes the same stupid jokes Dad used to make. We ordered the same beer without looking at each other's menus. He looked at me, eyes softer. I still hate what Dad did, he said. I still hate how long you stayed in something that was breaking. But I don't hate them. I thought I would. I don't. They're just as confused as we are. I nodded. That's all I ever wanted, I said. Not for you to pretend you're all one big happy family. Just for you to see they're not the enemy. The person who made these choices is in the ground. We're the ones who have to live with them. He sighed. We're not merging Christmases. Good, I replied. I can barely handle one set of in-laws. We both laughed, this time with a little less bitterness. If you're listening to this, and you found out your parent had a secret family, or you were the secret family someone else never knew about, let me tell you what I've learned sitting in the middle of two sets of wounded people. First, you can hold two truths at once. David was charming, funny, and in some ways a good father. He was also a liar who hurt everyone he loved by trying to keep too many plates spinning. Your love for someone doesn't erase the harm they did. The harm they did doesn't erase the real moments of love. Both can be true. Second, it is not the job of the children to carry the shame of the parent. My kids and Karen's kids did not choose where to be born, who to call dad, or what holidays he disappeared on. If you're tempted to hate the other siblings, aim your anger higher. Third, you do not owe anyone a merged family. You can choose limited contact, occasional holiday texts, or nothing at all. What you owe, if anything, is honesty with yourself about whether staying angry is protecting you, or just keeping you tied to the worst parts of a story you didn't write. Fourth, your spouse's lies are not your failure. Could I have left sooner? Maybe. Could I have pushed harder? Probably. But none of that means I made him cheat, or lie, or sign his name on 2 marriage certificates. If you stayed because you were scared, or tired, or hopeful, you were human, not the co-author of his betrayal. And finally, you get to decide
what you bring forward. I chose not to slam the door in Karen's face. I also chose not to throw it wide open and pretend we're a sitcom. My relationship with her and with her children is cautious, kind, and honest. We compare notes sometimes. We share stories. We occasionally sit on opposite sides of a graduation aisle and give each other a nod that says, "We made it. He didn't deserve us, but we deserve to know each other." The past is as closed as the casket we stood over, but the present belongs to us, not to the man whose name is on the headstone. If you're standing in the wreckage of someone else's double life, you are allowed to step out of it, wipe the dust off, and say, "I did not choose this story, but I will choose how my part ends." Mine ends in a quiet house, with my own name on the mailbox, and a phone that sometimes lights up with a text from Jasmine or Daniel or my own kids, sharing a picture, a memory, or a joke that we all know he would have told poorly. We roll our eyes. We laugh. We keep going. Because the real secret is, life after his secrets is still life, and it finally belongs to us.